forever I am thankful for the stars. So forever I am thankful for the stars. Precious cornerstone, sure foundation, you are faithful to the end. We are waiting on you, Jesus. We believe you're all to us. Only Son of God, sent from heaven, hope and mercy at the cross. You are everything, you're the promise. Jesus, you are all to us. Let the glory of your name be the passion of the church. Let the righteousness of God be a holy flame that burns. Let the saving love of Christ be the measure of our lives. We believe you're all to us. When this passing world is over, we will see you face to face, and forever we will worship Jesus. You are all to us. Let the glory of your name be the passion of the church. Let the righteousness of God be a holy flame that burns. Let the saving love of Christ be the measure of our lives. We believe you're all to us. You're all to us. You're all to us. You're all to us. Jesus, you are all to us. Let the glory of your name be the passion of the church. Let the righteousness of God be a holy flame that burns. Let the saving love of Christ be the measure of our lives. We believe you're all to us. We believe you're all to us. Before the throne of God above, I have a strong and perfect plea, a great high priest
All right, if we'll go ahead and get seated, we'll have a prayer, and then we'll start the marathon or the wrestling match, however you want to look at it. Let's go ahead and bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for another day to live in this world that you've created. We thank you for the rain that you've sent our way, and I thank you for the beauty that it brings to our land and how we depend on it for so many things. Much of this life depends on what you do in this world, and we thank you for your care. We thank you for your wisdom and your love for us. We thank you for your word, which we'll go through today. Help us to gain an understanding of the things that you would have us know. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So last week we looked at Jacob's life, how it unfolded as he was running from his brother. We saw Laban's trickery, which brought about a broken relationship between Jacob and his wives. But it also taught Leah to rely on God and to see God as what she needed rather than her husband's love. And this week we're going to look at how this whole family continues to struggle. And I'm going to mention it later on, but as I read through this, I see that wrestling isn't just the heel grabber isn't just Jacob's name. That is his whole life. It's wrapped up in this, and his family's wrapped up in it, and his father-in-law's wrapped up in it. All of this is wrapped up in a struggle or a wrestle for what people want and what their desires are. Genesis chapter 30, and we're going to read some. I'm going to summarize some. There's just a lot to go through, and so I'll do my best. Then Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, so she became jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I die." Jacob's anger burned against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" And she said, "Here is my maidservant Bilhah. Go into her that she may bear on my knees, that through her too I may obtain children." So she gave him her servant woman Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went into her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, "God has rendered justice to me, and has indeed listened to my voice, and has given me a son." Therefore she named him Dan. And Rachel's servant woman Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. So Rachel said, "With mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and I have indeed prevailed." She named him Naphtali. Then Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, so she took her servant woman Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Leah's servant woman Zilpah bore Jacob a son. And Leah said, "How fortunate!" So she named him Gad. And Leah's servant woman Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. And Leah said, "Happy am I, for women will call me happy." So she named him Asher. And in the days of the wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. And Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Is it a small matter to you for you to take my husband? Would you take my son's mandrakes also?" So Rachel said, "Therefore he will lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." Then Jacob came in from the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he lay with her that night, and God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, "God has given me my wages because I gave my servant woman to my husband." So she named him Issachar. And Leah conceived again and bore a sixth son to Jacob. Leah said, "God has gifted me with a good gift. This time my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons." She named him Zebulun. Afterwards she bore a daughter named Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. So she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she named him Joseph, saying, May Yahweh give me another son. Again, I mean, you read this, and it's just such a sad story. Just the fighting in this way. It's a tragic story. So when Rachel sees that her sister's having children and she is not, what does she do? She plays that favorite game of mankind. It's your fault. She blames him, becomes angry with him. Now, if we think back to when Rebekah, Jacob's mother, was barren, Rebekah went to Isaac, and what did Isaac do? What did Isaac do when Rebekah came to him saying, I'm barren? What did he do? Do we remember? He went to God in prayer, didn't he? He asked God, and God heard his cry, and he gave his wife children. When her children wrestled within her, what did she do? She inquired of God. Now, I didn't talk about this whenever we were looking at this passage, but I really think if you think in the context, what that means is the first time she goes to Isaac and says, she's upset and disappointed about it, and Isaac says, let's go to God. The next time she inquires of God, well, I think that means she inquired with Isaac of God, because of all that's happening there. And then, so we see all that. They have this good example of how parents behaved. Now, what is Jacob's response to Rachel's anger in her barren state? He says, who am I? Am I God that I can do something about this? No. And so instead of following the footsteps of his father, he just deals with this whole competition thing. And so it's this constant battle for Jacob. From the beginning, even if we look back again, what's happening in the womb? From the beginning, all of Jacob's life is a wrestle match. So not only does she blame Jacob, but Rachel is desperate. She says, give me children or else I die. This is, unfortunately, it is so important to her that she would say such a thing. Just think, maybe when you were younger, if you ever had emotions like this, that I need this or else I won't have the very thing that I want. I will never be happy unless I have this one thing. I might as well die. And so she wrestles with this so much that the second son her maidservant has is named Naphtali, because she wrestled with her sister and prevailed. It says, with mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. So his wife's childbearing becomes a wrestling match. And that continues as Leah says, well, I want some more children too. So she hands over her maidservant and seeks to have more children. Now, in a sense, we can see, last week we looked at when Leah was naming her children, her focus was on her husband. As Rachel's naming her children, her focus is on her sister competition, right? And then this time with Leah, hers is just, I'm just happy. She's still got some contentment. Now later on, she still has that kind of, there's still a competition between them, obviously. And it makes sense. It's natural to have this kind of competition. Isn't it? I mean, this isn't a good situation, right? So there's no real good way to say, well, how anybody should behave in these circumstances. They've been put in a situation that was really unfair for any of them. And so Leah still has a kind of peace, but a little bit of competitiveness. And in all of this, Reuben brings some mandrakes to Leah. And does anybody know what mandrakes were known for? Like aphrodisiacs and for helping you have children. So, hey, Mom, here's some mandrakes. Maybe you can have some more kids. I don't know. I mean, that's... and so Rachel sees this and she wants them. And so to get them, maybe she's thinking, if I have these, I'll have children too. And so unless you look into that, it's kind of weird. Like, who cares about flowers? Like, why would this be a big deal? But anyway, so she trades the flowers for a night with Jacob. And ironically, Rachel loses, right? So she loses, and Leah has 2 more sons. And so that just digs it a little deeper for Rachel, doesn't it? And then in the end, she finally has a son. And maybe this isn't right. Maybe this is just me reading into it. But you have the final words naming him, "May Yahweh give me another son." She's not quite content. Leah has her children. Of course, she had 4 of her own. And that 4th one is the one at which she kind of gets that peace and say, I don't have to be as loved by him because God's taking care of me. But Rachel still seems to have this competitive desire to have another son. So through all of this, Rachel's wrestling with her situation. Leah's, mixed up in the middle of this, and we no longer, last week in a sense we had a love triangle. And then this week it's even worse. You have a love pentagon. It's such a tragedy that all of this is happening, and yet this is who God has chosen to work His will. Any thoughts on this before we move on? All right. Oh, Tony.
I guess the thought that occurred to me when Rachel and me had a baby was that just because we may perceive that God's blessing is the same as His approval, doesn't necessarily mean that our feelings or thoughts are accurate.
Right.
And we don't get to hear what
Yeah.
God's feelings about that are.
Yeah.
He doesn't say that.
Yeah. So what Tony said is, even though God is blessing them, that doesn't necessarily mean that He's approving of their behavior, their attitudes, their motivations. And God, what does God say? He sends His rain on the just and the unjust. His blessings fall on everybody. Sometimes He blesses specific people, and sometimes many of His blessings come to multitudes of people who don't deserve it. And how many of us do deserve His blessings? Goose egg.
I just thought it interesting that the sons, they all had something to say about them, but then the daughter, she gets one little sentence.
Yeah. All of the sons get nice little comments about who they are, but Dinah, the only comment that she gets is later on another tragic story in the life of these people, and that is also sad. But there's all of this stuff that's going on, and so then, I'm just going to kind of summarize the next part. So Laban. Oh wait, whoops. Let's see, where am I? All right. So as soon as Rachel gives birth in verse 25, Jacob goes to Laban and asks if he can go home with take his wife, his children, and head back to his homeland, to his father. But Laban understands that through divination, and we're not going to get into what that means, but he's inquired as to how he's been blessed, and he sees that God has blessed himself, Laban, through Jacob, and he doesn't want to let him go. So Laban says, instead of leaving, how about you work for me some more? Let's come up with some new payment plan for you. And so he asked Jacob, what do you want your new wages to be? And Jacob says, I'll take all the speckled and spotted, dark-colored sheep and goats as payment. And Laban agrees. And Jacob even says, like, we'll go and we'll go through and make sure that I'm not holding on to any of your sheep that I'm not supposed to, and so on. And so in that, not only, so they agree, but then Laban, again, the master trickster that he is, he goes and he separates the sheep before Jacob can. So he goes and takes the spotted sheep and keeps them for himself, moves them 3 days' journey away, basically, from Jacob, and keeps them where Jacob won't notice them. And then, and so here we see Jacob again in another kind of wrestling match with his uncle. A constant change of things, a constant maneuvering, constant fighting over wages and whatnot. So Jacob wants freedom, Laban wants blessings. And so he's trying to grasp for what Jacob has because he knows that he's being blessed by Jacob. And so now Jacob comes up with a strategy and to increase the number of speckled, spotted, and striped sheep. And so he peels poplar, almond, and plane tree branches. I thought it's a weird word. I didn't know that there was such a thing as a plane tree. Because, anyway, it's not just a plane tree, it's a plane tree. Anyway, sorry. So he exposes the strips in the water, and he does this thinking that it will cause them to change colors. And he selectively breeds the strongest ones in this way. So, and I looked into just curiosity of what we understand today, if there's any possibility that what he did actually could result in this. There's some maybe some acids and things like that could cause maybe the coats to get stained. And as we understand today in modern science, that epigenetics, which is like things on the outside affecting the future generation, so things that like the stresses in my life can actually affect my children at birth. Not my, really more the wives. Stresses in life can actually deal with that. But anyway, so there's possibility that there's an impact on that, that what he's doing. But we'll see in the end where that really comes from. So in verse 43 of chapter 30, it says, So the man spread out exceedingly and had large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. So Jacob has had success. Everything that he has is expanded. If Laban had noticed that he was blessed through Jacob, he sees it even more now. Verse 31, or chapter 31, verses 1 through 5 says, Then Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob has taken away all that belonged to our father. From what belonged to our father, he has also made all this wealth. And Jacob saw the face of Laban, and behold, it was not friendly towards him as formerly. Then Yahweh said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers and to your kin, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field, and he said to them, I see your father's face, that is not friendly towards me as formerly, but the God of my father has been with me. And after this, he continues on and says, You also know that I have served your father with all my power, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. However, God did not allow him to harm me. And then if we look on down into verse 9, look into verse 9, chapter 31, verse 9. Who is it that Jacob gives credit for all his success? God. He gives it to God. Jacob has described in all of this how God controlled the outcomes. Whatever Laban said the wages would be, God provided. The flocks produced according to the speckled, to the streaked, to the spotted. It didn't matter. If there was any change in that time, perhaps there was some, and because this is about 6 years, Jacob's made efforts to produce this outcome, but he does not ascribe his efforts to be the reason for his success. His success comes from God. And as I considered this, it made me think of Proverbs chapter 16, verse 9. The heart of a man plans his way, but Yahweh directs his steps. Jacob had a plan, but God is the one who fulfilled everything. He fulfills his blessings. He helps Jacob where Jacob cannot. So whether or not Jacob's efforts could actually cause his sheep to get speckled or spotted really isn't the point, is it? Whether he was capable with his human wisdom to create a situation where his flocks would increase really isn't the point, is it? Who provided the increase? God provides the increase. So Jacob goes on to describe in a dream how God identifies himself. The God that's telling him to go back is the same God that he met at Bethel, has commanded him to leave Laban's land and return home. And his wife's unanimous response, they're in agreement, maybe for the first time in a long time. And Rachel and Leah said to him, "Do we still have any portion or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not counted to him as foreigners? For he has sold us and has also entirely consumed our purchase price. Surely all the riches which God has delivered over to us from our father belongs to us and our children. Now then, do whatever God has said to you." So Laban has acted so treacherously that his daughters are like, "Let's get out of here. Dad's not been good to us or you, and has made things even worse for us. He's tried to take what could have been ours." And so they're ready to leave. They don't have to be persuaded that their father would probably try to trick him another time. And so Jacob departs. He gathers his family, and his livestock, which we'll see is very considerable. Rachel steals her father's household idols without Jacob's knowledge, and Jacob and his family flee while Laban is occupied shearing his sheep. So this is probably, it's hard to say exactly where this is, but this is one idea of how this would have come about. So they're starting somewhere up in this area, okay? And so Jacob is, at the beginning of this part of the story, Laban moves his sheep 3 days' journey away. So then, after Jacob takes off, we'll see in the next section that it takes 3 days for a messenger to get to Laban, and so he's still been for 6 years been keeping that distance with his sheep away from Jacob, and so there's 3 days distance, and then they come down somewhere around here, probably. I mean, at least as far as the way the text describes it. Genesis 31:22, it says, "Then it was told to Laban on the third day after Jacob had fled," so that's why I assume that he's still keeping that distance. "So it took his relatives with him and pursued him a distance of 7 days' journey and overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. And God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night and said to him, 'Beware lest you speak to Jacob either good or bad. And so Laban attempts to cheat Jacob by hiding his sheep still. He's 3 days journeying away. And so basically Jacob has a 6-day head start, if you think about it. So it takes 3 days to get a messenger to him, 3 days to get back to there. And so Jacob has a 6-day head start. And yet it takes 7 days for him to get there. And he's got large flocks and herds and children and wives, all ages. And so you would think it would take him longer. And so as I was reading this, I again am reminded, maybe perhaps there's some foreshadowing of the speedy exit from Egypt. That those first hearers of this would identify with that fleeing from in slavery to someone, that their blessing, and that and that it would take more effort for them to catch up than it is for them to go. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. But Laban, unlike Pharaoh, he softens his heart when he understands that God has blessed Jacob and that he is not allowed to say anything good or evil against him. And so since he can't say anything bad, he says, "What have you done with my gods?" It's like, there's at least one thing I have against you. And Jacob, like so many of us would do, says very rashly, whoever, in verse 32, whoever has taken this idol shall be put to death. Fortunately for Jacob, Rachel is not discovered to be the thief, because if she is, who knows what had happened. And I wonder, this is just one of those things. God doesn't allow us to be tested beyond what we are capable of handling at that time. Perhaps maybe Jacob just wasn't in the right state to be able to handle it. It's too much for him at that moment. Maybe. But Jacob makes this rash statement, and fortunately Rachel is not discovered. She's hiding the idols under her camel saddle and package and whatnot, and it says that she's in her the way of women, and so he doesn't touch anything. So he's well, surely they don't have it. So, and then and so we see all of this, and we see that God is faithful. In chapter 28, verses 20 through 21, Jacob has just finished his vision. He's now vowing to God. Jacob said in his vow, "If God will be with me and will keep me on this journey on which I am going, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in peace, then Yahweh will be my God." And so, even though when I read this, I think, is that the right kind of language we need to use with God? If you do this, then I will, or you will be my God. I question that. But in the end, is God in a sense maybe honoring this? Perhaps, because what is God doing for him? He's doing what he said he'd do. But Jacob's going to see that he gets that. He's going to... Did my battery die? My battery died, I think. If you've got Larry, I might be able to move forward, but you have that... Well, anyway, so you have that peace. All right, so he's going to return in peace because his father-in-law is chasing him down, angry, and nothing happens. And we'll see the same happens on the other end, which we'll really get to next week. But so Jacob's returning in peace. His father-in-law is not doing anything to him. He doesn't lose his wife or his property, and so anyway, Laban and Jacob come to an agreement. They cut a covenant. We've talked about what cutting a covenant is. It's on now. It was on, I promise. The screen was blank. I'm not making it up. So anyway, Laban and him come to an agreement. They cut a covenant, and a covenant, when they cut a covenant, they take the animals, they cut them in half, set them beside them, and as if these are the animals, they walk through them, basically saying, let be done to me what is done to these if I don't abide by the agreement. The agreement is basically that they will not pass this place to each other, that they erect another monument to say, this is kind of a boundary. You don't cross over this to me for harm, and I won't cross over to you to harm. That doesn't mean they can't pass. It just means that I'm not going to seek any vengeance against you or anything against you for harm. And so they agree. And then, after they do this, they have a sacrifice on the mountain. So Jacob offers a sacrifice on the mountain and calls his relatives to eat a meal. And they ate a meal and spent the night on the mountain. And Laban arose early in the morning, kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. So after all of this conflict, what do? They sit down for a Thanksgiving dinner, and they work out their differences, and they say goodbye. And so there's all of this conflict in this family, a whole bunch of conflict. And in the end, some of this conflict comes to a point of even, in a sense, perhaps even bringing Rachel and Leah together. They're unified, and we're with Jacob. Our father is not caring for us, and they're ready to go. Jacob and Laban finally have some resolution here, and there's some peace. And so finally they have this final moment of a meal together, and then they depart and turn different ways. And though in many ways all of that struggle leads to this point, but at the end, what do they have? They have peace. They have peace. And what is peace without some conflict? How do you know what peace is without understanding the conflict? I mean, it would be nice to live all our lives in peace, but unfortunately, we're not very good at that. So from here, Jacob continues on his journey, and he meets angels or messengers from God right after this. It doesn't really talk about that. It's just interesting. He runs into some angels. Wow, that's interesting. We're going to call this the camp of God, and then it just moves on. Again, just an interesting kind of side note. He runs into another messenger of God. Anyway, there's no kind of interaction that we see, but it just leaves an impression with Jacob. Now, Jacob is done with one wrestling match, wrestling with Laban over wages and just his freedom and his life. But Jacob has a new plan, okay? Jacob is the master of planning, isn't he? He plans everything. So Genesis 32, 3 through 5, Jacob sent messengers before him to his brother Esau to the land of Seir, the country of Edom. He also commanded them, saying, thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and have been delayed until now. I have oxen and donkeys and flocks and male and female slaves, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight. So he sends messengers ahead of him, possibly maybe to assess his brother's feelings towards him. And they return from meeting Esau and say, Esau is coming with 400 men. If you hear that, and the last time you saw your brother, he wanted to kill you, what is your assumption? Nothing has changed, right? And so Jacob has fled from his life from one direction, and now from the other direction comes another threat, which doesn't surprise him. He knows this is coming, really, which is why he's preparing for it. Verse 7 through 13, then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided his people who were with him, the flocks and the herds and the camels, into two camps, and he said, if Esau comes to one camp and strikes it, then the camp which remains will escape. Then Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and the God of my father Isaac, O Yahweh, who said to me, return to the land and to your kin, and I will prosper you. I am unworthy of the loving kindness of all the truth which you have shown to your slave. For with my staff only I crossed the Jordan, and now I have become two camps. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear lest he come and strike me down with the mothers and the children. For you said, I will surely prosper you and make your seed as the sand of the sea, which is too great to be numbered. So he spent the night there. So how does Jacob feel about this approaching conflict with his brother? He's terrified. He's afraid of what's coming. So what does Jacob do about it? What does he do? What has changed in Jacob? He's not trying to solve this problem on his own. He knows my brother's coming. He's got a strategy. He's got a plan. He always has a plan. But despite his plan, who does he go to? He goes to God. He spends time with God, talks to God. What kind of attitude does he go to God with?
Well, he made two plans, right? I mean, he's going to put a buffer there in front of him. But he says, God, remember, you said these things for me. Is it going to happen?
Yeah. So,
Just to make sure God remembers.
right. And so instead of so he's asking God to remember, but what is the attitude right here? I am unworthy of your loving kindness. He's not proud. He doesn't feel like he's deserving. He's unworthy. What do you call that attitude? Humility. Up to this point in his life, have we known Jacob to be humble? Humble. He has not been a humble person. He has been a thief. He has been grabbing at other people's heels to get what he wanted. Who is he concerned about in this? I mean, he is concerned about himself, but who else is he concerned about? His children, the mothers and the children. Lest they strike me down with, of course, that may be, maybe he is a little selfish. Man. It's like, lest they strike me down also, because I'm sending them out before me. I don't know. So this is not the same Jacob that we saw at Bethel when he was saying, God, if you will do all this, then you will be my God. Now he's saying, God, you are my God. You have said these things. Deliver on your promises. And in a sense, his wrestling with God really seems to start here. He's grasping onto the promises of God and holding tight to them and calling them to God's memory. God doesn't need to be reminded, but still, that's how we talk to God. God, I know your promise. I believe in your promise. I want your promise. Please fulfill your promise. And so after this, Jacob, being who he is still going to follow through with a plan. So he's prayed, but he's also proactively promoting peace with his brother. Genesis 32:14 through 15. He sends 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milk camels and their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, 10 male donkeys. So he's sending forth something, waves of placating bribes to his brother to say, hey, I love you, brother. Please leave me alone. And he tells his servants to say, when my brother Esau meets you and asks you, saying, to who do these belong, or where are you going, and to whom do these animals in front of you belong, then you shall say, these belong to my servant Jacob. It is a present to my lord Esau. And behold, he is also behind us. So he splits up these gifts to kind of placate his brother. Man, there's not enough time for anything in this class. There's so much to cover. But anyway, almost every commentary I've ever read, when it talks about these passages, it talks about how Jacob's sending them across almost to self-protection. He's sending them out to across the Jabbok to be safe. So they're going to be injured before him. As we see Jacob's progression in life and his faith, I personally don't really see that. I wonder if because he spent so much time around his sheep and outside and not necessarily always around his family, because when he starts on this venture to leave, he calls his family out to him. And so I see this as he needs some time to prepare for tomorrow alone. And so he spends some time alone. He sends them forward because he needs that time to prepare for the unknown of tomorrow. And so, while Jacob is left alone, a man wrestled with him until the breaking of dawn, and he saw that he had prevailed against him. So he had not prevailed against him. So he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. And then he said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." And he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him and said, "Please tell me your name." And he said, "Why is it you are asking my name?" And he blessed him there. Then Jacob named the place Peniel, for he had seen God face to face, yet his life had been delivered. And then the sun rose and he limped across. I'm skipping ahead. So he limps across. So in every translation that I read of this, Jacob's wrestling with a man. But when we look at Hosea chapter 12, verse 3 through 4, it says that in his womb he took his brother's heel. In his maturity he wrestled with God. Indeed, he wrestled with the angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor and found him at Bethel. And there he spoke with us. All sorts of stuff we can say about this, but we don't have any time. Unfortunately, I didn't plan on that anyway. But what we see is Jacob's life. He's wrestling with. At first, he wants the birthright. Then he wants the blessing. Then he flees for his life. He's always wrestling with something. He acquires a wife, but is tricked about it. He gets another wife. His wives are bickering because of the birth of children, and all of this is a mess. And so he's wrestling his whole life. And this whole set of passages looks like just a giant wrestling match with a whole bunch of people thrown in. And it seems like a mess. But what we see is people growing, people's faith increasing, because throughout all of this, God is doing something. Now, also interesting, it's not fair. From all of the passages that we look at with Jacob, from chapter 27, there's 2 verses that reference God, and one in which Jacob lies about God's blessing him with a speedy acquisition of food for his father to receive the blessing. In chapter 28, we see the Lord is referenced 3 times in Jacob's life, in which is the encounter with God. In chapter 29, with Leah, the only interaction with God we see is that Leah's talking with God and her naming of her children. In chapter 30, we see again his wives are referencing God, and even though Jacob is trying to scheme to create a large number of sheep, we see kind of in 31 that maybe possibly that God is the one that gave him the idea for how he's doing this. Anyway, and then chapter 31, we see how Jacob is talking to God and sees God working in his life numerous times, over and over and over. We see few references to God in the beginning of his story, and by the end, it is exploded. God is all over his life, and he sees all that God is doing in his life. So Jacob wrestles his whole life. He wrestles as a second son. He grabs the heel of his brother. He steals his inheritance, his blessing, and has little concern for God in the beginning. But by the end of this part of his story, we see that though Jacob has engineered ways to save himself, he's depending on God to do the saving. So in all of this, we see that all of us have a different way, not way, but there's one way to follow God. But all of us, that journey looks a little different. Some of us fall down in different ways. We have different scrapes and different scars that we have to deal with along the way. Different situations that we'll find ourselves in that are unique to us. But there's one way. It's trusting in Him. Whatever that ends up looking like, it may look like a big, giant mess. Like this does. But when you trust in God, He'll get you through to the end. Jacob's life is a whole bunch of wrestling and being transformed by God. We see that God's working in all of this. And in the end, what is it that Jacob's holding on to? He's clinging to, not just in the idea of wrestling with God. That's a very big deal, but he's wrestling with God and clinging to, holding fast to those promises. I will not let you go unless you bless me. I want your blessing. I need your blessing. I must have your blessing. And he knows that it's with God that he's wrestled. And that's what we need to do. Hold fast to those promises. Trust in it. And whatever is happening in your life, trust in those promises. Thank you very much.